For a judge to be worthy of such trust, he or she must be faithful to the Constitution and to the statutes passed by the Congress. He or she must put aside his personal views or preferences and follow the law, not make it.
Merrick Garland, Chief Judge for the U.S. Court of Appeals here in Washington, speaking at the White House this week after President Obama nominated him to the Supreme Court. And it's time now for our Sunday group, syndicated columnist George Will, Lisa Lerer, who covers politics for the Associated Press, Washington Examiner columnist and conservative pollster Kirsten Soltis Anderson, and Bob Woodward of the Washington Post. So, George, your thoughts about the Garland nomination and the stand that Republicans are taking in the Senate? No confirmation hearing, no vote.
Well, the Republicans have two reasons for taking that position. One is to demonstrate to the Republican base something the base now very much doubts, which is that there's some reason to want the Republicans to control the Senate. They can't defund Planned Parenthood. They can't repeal Obamacare. They can't even prevent the reauthorization of the Export-Import Bank. This they can stand up and say we can actually do something. Second, this is a way, they say, of protesting executive overreach by the president. Although this is a clear constitutional right and duty of the president to nominate people to the federal judiciary. What's puzzling is that the Republican Senate leaders who are saying this have all said, of course, they will support Donald Trump if he's the party's nominee. So they're saying we're quite content to have judicial nominations made by Mr. Trump, whose qualifications for so doing are somewhat foggy. And it's puzzling to hear my friend Mitch McConnell saying with reverence that we must follow the Biden rule, a Biden rule endorsed with equal reverence by Harry Reid. The Biden rule was, he said, no confirmations during a political season. When are we not in a political season? It's just not an election year. By what principle do we decide when a president's ability to nominate people becomes progressively attenuated? After the midterm elections of a second term of a president? When is it? I don't understand.
We asked you for questions for the panel, and following up on the point that George made, we got this from Rob Danger. He tweeted this: will Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell keep his word or fold like he usually does? Kirsten, at a time, and I want to pick up on this question of trying to keep faith with the base, at a time when grassroots support for the Republican leadership here in Washington is at all-time low, when you can just see this in this election, how little they trust that the D.C. establishment, the Republican D.C. establishment, is going to stand up for them. Is this an effective way for McConnell to try to mobilize the base? And do you think he's going to be able? We're already seeing that first crack with Mark Kirk. Can he keep his soldiers in line?
Remember that Mitch McConnell came out with this strategy pretty much the day that the vacancy came open. He knew that if there was even a hint that this would be the sort of thing where Senate Republicans might entertain the president's nominee, might allow the court to move to the left, that there would be outrage. So he sort of wanted to shut that down right away. But look at the members of the Senate who are beginning to say, I'd be at least willing to have a meeting with this nominee. They are Republicans who are up for re-election, and they are in seats where it is a blue or a purple state. They are states that are unlikely to vote for a Republican nominee in a presidential election. And they need to differentiate themselves from the national party narrative so that they, at the same time that their state is perhaps voting for a Democratic candidate at the top of the ticket, is still nonetheless sending them back to Washington a little bit further down on the ballot.
Bob, I thought that the White House Chief of Staff, Dennis McDonough, made some news in our interview here. He went further than the White House has so far in saying that Obama is going to stick by the Garland nomination, even into a lame duck. Even if, let's say, Hillary Clinton is elected president, that he would stick by the Garland nomination. Kind of interesting that he's saying, you know, I'm going to stay by him, and if Hillary Clinton, even if she's just been elected president, if they want to confirm my nominee, so be it.
I think it's confusing to people because this is all about politics. This is pure politics on both sides, and as you pointed out, hypocrisy on both sides.
Both sides have argued exactly the opposite side.
Exactly, and what McConnell, the Senate Majority Leader, is saying, hey, look, and it's the advice and consent provision in the Constitution, we can do it any way we want. And he's actually quite right. There's nothing in the Constitution that says you have to do it in a timely fashion and so forth. So the issue is whether you can make the court a majority liberal body. Everyone concedes that if Garland goes on the court, you're going to have 5 votes on the liberal side. What is interesting, and George has pointed this, I mean, Garland is an extraordinary judge. He is somebody, I did a book years ago on the Supreme Court and have tried to follow it since, and he's exactly the sort of person that should be on the court. He's reasonable, he listens, he is not really partisan in any way, but he's a liberal.
Wait a minute. You know what a lot of people are going to say is when it comes down to a decision and it's 5-4, he'll end up being with the liberal judges as opposed to the conservative justices.
He will, but you know, look, step back. There are going to be liberals and conservatives on the court, and if you're going to have some liberals have a sensible, rational person, I mean, like lots of people said about Scalia, they didn't agree with him, but gee, he served an important function on the court, and that's the way it works. You have to be a consensus builder, and Garland is somebody like that, but I don't think he's going to make it. I don't think he's going to be confirmed.
Lisa, let's pick up on this from the political side, on the Democratic aspect. They clearly feel that this argument, do your job. You're there for another 8 months or whatever it is, and the idea that you're simply going to refuse to have a hearing, refuse to vote. When you talk to the Sanders and Clinton camps, do they think this is effective, and do they think it'll move votes in the fall election?
Yeah, it was interesting to hear Dennis McDonough tell you it's not an election year issue, because that's clearly not how Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders see this. They think it is an effective issue because basically, look, they'll need to do 2 things in the fall: rally their base and pull over independents. They think this can allow them to do both. It's a strong motivator for base Democrats, particularly African Americans, who tend to view a lot of this Republican opposition to the president through a racial lens. They also think if Trump is at the top of the Republican ticket, they may be able to pull over some moderate Republicans who may not like the idea of Donald Trump picking the next Supreme Court justice, particularly, as Democrats like to point out, he said that his sister would be an excellent justice, and she has a record of being very pro-abortion rights. So they think this is an area where they could make a really strong political argument. The politics get a little more complicated once you get into a lame duck session, because quite frankly, Merrick Garland is not the nominee that I think Hillary Clinton would like to choose in her
She'd
first
like somebody
term.
more liberal.
Yeah, a lot of the liberal groups feel that way. So, you know, it's going to get, that's why you see them focusing on the need for a vote and not really talking all that much about the nominee, and certainly not saying whether they would keep him and re-nominate him should either Hillary Clinton or Bernie Sanders win the presidency.
So, George, in less than a minute that we have left in this segment, what about the lame duck scenario, that Hillary Clinton wins or Donald Trump wins, and some of those Republicans say, you know what, Merrick Garland doesn't look like such a bad nominee?
If President Cruz is president-elect the morning after the election, the Republicans' choice is clear. You wait for him to make the nominee. If Trump is the president-elect, I don't know how you guess who he might want to put on the court. But suppose in the morning after the election, it's President-elect Clinton, and the president comes out and says, I know what McDonough told Wallace a long time ago, but...
I'm sure that'll be the top of his announcement.
But he'll say, let's adhere to the freshly minted McConnell rule. The McConnell rule is that nominees should be sent up by a president after the people have spoken. The people have said Mrs. Clinton, and Mrs. Clinton says, fine, withdraw Mr. Garland and appoint a 43-year-old, not a 63-year-old, not a moderate, but a 43-year-old firebrand. Serve the Republicans right.
All right. Strong letter to follow. We have to take a break here, panel. See you a little later.